I wasn't the kind of man who checked his wife's GPS or tracked steps after midnight, but when the truth starts whispering through locked doors and dead phone batteries, you stop being the man you were and become someone else. That night, her message came at 6:30 sharp. Stuck at work, don't wait up. Only this time, I didn't wait. I followed the silence, and what I found changed everything. Now we'd been married 7 years. Not always smooth, no marriage is, but I'd come to know the rhythms of her days the way you know the sound of your own front door closing. And lately, those rhythms were off. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She's a project manager at this big digital marketing firm, always racing from one campaign deadline to the next. Sometimes she stayed late. Sometimes she brought work home. But over the last couple of months, her stuck-at-work texts became more frequent, more casual, almost too casual, like she was copying and pasting the same line. I could feel something shifting, even if I didn't have the full picture yet. I'm not a paranoid man. I grew up on a farm in Missouri, raised by a father who believed hard work solved most problems, and that trust wasn't something you handed out like Halloween candy. You earned it slowly, and when it cracked, even a little, you didn't ignore it. So when Evelyn's texts became slippery, when she started brushing off plans, missing dinner, blaming dead phones and overloaded meetings, I paid attention, and that night, when I read that "don't wait up" message for the fifth or sixth time in a month, I felt the pressure rise. Something didn't add up. Her GPS pings, yeah, I admit I'd started checking, weren't consistent with her office location. Not always. She always had an excuse. A supplier dinner, a surprise brainstorm offsite, a just coffee meeting with a new client. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but when you start treating your phone like it's a ticking bomb, chances are it is. It all pointed in one direction. I thought back to earlier in our marriage, how she used to text me memes during meetings, or save little leftovers she knew I liked. She once drove across town in a snowstorm to bring me my lunch when I forgot it. Now, now she barely looked up when I walked through the door. Her smiles felt pasted on, like she was performing wife out of obligation, not affection. That night, as I stood in the kitchen with her text still glowing on my phone, I stared at it for a long while. I just stood there, staring at that short sentence like it was some kind of code I needed to crack. Stuck at work, don't wait up. I reread it 5, 10 times. I imagined her typing it. Was she in an office, really? Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead? Or was she sitting across from someone else, thumbs flicking out this lie with practiced ease? I poured a whiskey, sat at the table. My dog, Jasper, hopped up onto the rug beside me like he always did, sensing something was off. Dogs know. They always do. Then I stood up, walked to the bedroom, grabbed my keys, my jacket, and my old duffel bag, half packed from my last hunting trip, but missing the one thing I was now sure I needed: clarity. I wasn't going to wait anymore. This time I was going to find out for myself. I stood in the garage, the air still thick with motor oil and last year's fishing gear, staring at the calendar app on my phone. We used to sync our schedules just to make things easier. Doctor's appointments, birthdays, reminders to pick up groceries. Evelyn liked being organized, and honestly, I liked seeing those little blocks of color that meant life was moving forward together. But tonight, that digital calendar wasn't offering comfort. It was offering a clue. Right there, under her name, was a vague entry, just client review, set from 6:30 to 9 p.m., marked as private. That wasn't like her. She always labeled meetings clearly, usually with names or company tags. And client review wasn't something she'd schedule that late, especially not on a Wednesday. Then I tapped for details and saw the location. It wasn't her office. It wasn't even a coffee shop or one of those co-working places she liked for brainstorming sessions. It was a street address, a plain residential one, Midway Avenue. I knew it right away. I'd seen it once before on a birthday card that came with a bottle of whiskey. To Evelyn from Mark. I hadn't thought much of it then. Mark was just a co-worker. One of those names that popped up too often in conversation, but never with any weight. That's how they do it, I guess. Slip the name in enough that it feels normal. Familiar. Now that address was right there, on our shared calendar, and she hadn't said a word about it. I didn't hesitate. No pacing, no calling around for advice, no half measures. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat, backed the truck out slow so the tires wouldn't squeal, and turned onto the main road heading toward Midway. It was about 20 minutes out, not far, but just long enough for the wrong kind of thoughts to creep in. The road was mostly empty, just the usual late commuters and a few joggers in reflective gear. The kind of folks who keep to themselves, who wouldn't blink if they saw a truck creeping through a quiet neighborhood. Mark lived in one of those newer subdivisions, cookie-cutter houses with vinyl siding and zero personality. Too clean, too perfect. The kind of place where people put fake rocks over sprinkler heads and hire companies to hang their Christmas lights. I'd never liked it, never trusted it. As I pulled into the cul-de-sac, my headlights washed over rows of identical mailboxes. I parked a few houses down, turned off the engine, and let the night settle around me. Crickets chirped. A porch light flickered next door. One garage was open, glowing with the soft hum of a ceiling-mounted heater. But my focus was on 431 Midway, Mark's place. The driveway was empty, but the porch light was on. And through the window, framed by those gauzy curtains that always looked too fancy for a single guy's house, I saw movement, just a silhouette, then another. Nothing too clear, nothing obvious, but enough to confirm what my gut had been screaming for weeks. I sat for a moment longer, gripping the steering wheel like it was holding me back from something I hadn't fully defined yet. My mind wanted to run, to storm in, to shout. But my body was steady, cold even. The kind of calm you get when you pass the point of panic and into the territory of action. I got out, quietly, didn't slam the door, just locked it with the fob and started walking. With each step, I thought about all the little things Evelyn used to do that stopped without warning. The packed lunches when I had long drives, the notes she left in my coat pocket, the way she used to tuck her feet under me on the couch during winter. All of it had faded in the past 6 months, replaced with distracted nods and tired excuses. And now her location, her choice to mark this meeting on the calendar like it was any other errand, was the last straw. I walked up the front steps of 431. My boots landed heavy on the concrete, echoing just enough to send a warning through the door. I stood under the shadow of a pine tree, just off to the side of Mark's house. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels louder the longer you listen. I checked my watch. 3 p.m. The porch light gave off a dull yellow halo, and a mosquito kept buzzing near my ear. But I didn't flinch. I was locked in, watching the road like a man waiting for a ghost to appear. And then she did. A silver sedan turned the corner slowly, headlights cutting across the front lawn before the driver flicked them off and rolled into the curb like they didn't want to be seen. I knew the car. It was Evelyn's. She'd taken it that morning without a word about where her day would end. The engine stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. The windows were tinted, but I could still make out her silhouette shifting inside. Checking her hair maybe, fixing her jacket. Whatever she was doing, it was the kind of thing you do before walking into a place you don't want to look like a stranger in. Then the door opened, and out stepped Evelyn. My heart didn't speed up. It didn't crash. It just slowed, focused. Like everything in my body knew this was the moment we'd been circling for weeks, and it wasn't even the look on her face or the way she moved that hit me hardest. It was the shoes. Red suede heels, the exact pair I bought her last Christmas. She'd pointed them out in a window while we were downtown for dinner, said they were too much, but smiled like she loved them. I circled back 2 days later, picked them up and wrapped them myself. She wore them once, maybe twice. Said they were special occasion shoes. I guess this counted. I stared at them, those damn red heels, and felt the final piece click into place. No more questions. No more wondering. My gut had been right. My instincts, the ones I'd pushed aside to avoid confrontation, had been screaming the truth. She didn't look nervous, didn't even glance around, just clicked across the pavement. Each step measured and sure, like she knew exactly where she was going and who was waiting for her inside. Her black coat fell just past her knees, catching the breeze as she moved. She adjusted the collar with one hand and carried her purse in the other. She looked calm, and that stung in a way I wasn't prepared for. There wasn't a hint of guilt in her walk. No hesitation. She wasn't second-guessing this moment like I'd hoped, foolishly, that she might. She moved like someone heading into familiar territory, into something she had chosen long before this night. My hands didn't shake. They curled slightly, more out of instinct than anger. I wasn't mad yet. That would come later. What I felt in that moment was cold, hard clarity. That kind of stillness that happens before a storm hits. A knowing, not a feeling. The porch light caught the glint of her earrings as she turned slightly before reaching the door. Gold hoops, the same pair she wore on our 5th anniversary. Back then, she paired them with a sundress and that goofy little laugh she only used when she'd had too much wine. Now she wore them like armor, a different kind of knight, a different kind of woman. She rang the bell once. I watched Mark open the door. I couldn't see much of him, just the silhouette, the outline of a man who didn't hesitate to welcome another man's wife into his house on a Wednesday evening. His hand didn't reach for a handshake. It rested casually against the doorframe. Too relaxed, too damn familiar. Evelyn stepped in without a word. Didn't look back, didn't pause. That was all I needed. The heels, the coat, the walk, the way she vanished behind that door like she'd done it a dozen times before. You can doubt a lot in life. People, promises, even your own memory. But you can't doubt what you see with your own eyes. And right then, standing half hidden by a pine tree on a quiet street, with the porch light buzzing and a mosquito whining in my ear, I saw everything I needed to. Red suede heels, chosen by me, worn for someone else. I didn't move for a full minute, just stood there watching that house like it might disappear if I blinked, but it didn't. It stood there, solid, silent, complicit. I took a breath. Deep, slow, like I'd just finished chopping wood. Not to calm down, but to steady up, because now I knew, and knowing changes everything. I stepped out from behind that pine tree like a man with a mission, because I was. Every step up that driveway sounded loud in my ears, boots crunching gravel like gunfire in an empty field. The porch light glared down, white and unkind, casting sharp shadows across the siding. I walked straight up to that door, raised my fist and hammered it 3 times with enough force to rattle the frame. A few seconds passed. The kind of seconds that stretch and stretch until they feel like rope tightening around your chest. I could hear movement inside, the sound of feet on tile. Then the door opened, and there he was. Mark. I'd never looked him in the eye before. I'd seen pictures, heard the stories, caught glimpses from the office party Evelyn made me attend last year. But standing there in the flesh, smug and startled in equal measure, he didn't look like much. A little taller than me, softer around the middle. The kind of man who got too comfortable behind a desk and thought words could solve everything. He didn't even have time to speak. My right hand connected with his jaw like it had a purpose, and it did. The impact echoed off the walls, clean and solid. His head snapped sideways and he stumbled back into the entryway, knocking into a little table with a glass vase on it. The vase wobbled but didn't fall. "I saw the text," I said, stepping across the threshold before he could find his footing. "Tell me why." His mouth opened, probably to spit out some slick excuse or ask me to calm down. But he never got the chance. From the corner of my eye, I saw Evelyn. She was halfway across the living room, frozen mid-step, one hand raised like she'd been reaching for something. Maybe her coat, maybe the truth. I didn't care. She didn't look shocked. She looked caught. I locked eyes with her. "Outside," I said, walking straight toward her. She didn't move. I grabbed her by the arm, not gently, and pulled her through the door. She tried to speak, but I wasn't in the mood to hear the same tired lies. We stepped out onto the porch, into that unrelenting porch light. No more shadows, no more excuses. "How many times?" I demanded. When she didn't answer, just stared at me with that wide-eyed look that women give when they're not ready to admit a damn thing, I slapped her. Not out of impulse, but out of pure, sharp betrayal. The sound cracked the air. Her head turned from the blow, hair whipping across her cheek, and she staggered back a step. I had never hit her before. Never even raised my voice beyond what the moment called for. But that night, that wasn't the woman I married standing in front of me. That was a stranger wearing her face, walking into another man's home in the shoes I gave her. Mark stepped out behind us, holding his face, moving like he wanted to protect her. Wrong move. You stay the hell out of this, I warned, but he didn't listen. His hand twitched forward, maybe toward her, maybe toward me. Didn't matter. I reached out, grabbed the collar of his button-down, and slammed him against the brick siding. His breath whooshed out, and he gasped, shocked. "This what you do, Mark?" I growled inches from his face. "You sneak behind a man's back, smile to his face, and steal what ain't yours?" The neighbor's porch light flicked on. I didn't care. Evelyn stood there, her lip bleeding slightly from where her teeth had caught it during the slap. She looked stunned, maybe embarrassed, but not sorry. Never once did she say, "I'm sorry." And that's what made the anger burn hotter. "You two think you're clever," I said, turning toward them both. "You think lies wrapped in office lingo and late meetings make it okay?" Neither answered. The porch light above us buzzed. Mark leaned against the wall, holding his side, breathing shallow. Evelyn wiped at her lip, finally blinking like she was waking up from a long nap. I stepped back, shaking the ache out of my hand, heart hammering like a drum. What they felt didn't matter now. The damage was done. They could explain it 100 ways, wrap it in guilt or excuses or twisted logic, but the truth had already laid its claim. I looked at both of them, two people who thought they were safe behind locked doors and empty words. I'd kicked that illusion down, and I wasn't finished yet. My breath came out in short, ragged pulls, the kind you get after splitting wood for hours or running full tilt through the woods behind your childhood home. I looked at them both, didn't say a word for a full 10 seconds. Mark's eyes flicked to the side, like maybe he was calculating a route to the door. Evelyn wouldn't meet my gaze. She just stood there, coat buttoned halfway, hair a little wild now, like the night had finally caught up to her. When I did speak, my voice didn't rise. It didn't crack. It came out flat and solid, like a weight dropping onto a concrete floor. "You two betrayed me," I said, "and I'm done letting it slide." Mark opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, to clarify, to soften the blow with some clever spin. I held up a hand, he closed it again. "I'm not here to ask why," I continued. "That ship sailed. I know why. I've been watching this unfold one lie at a time. One late meeting, one phone died, one laugh at a joke I wasn't part of. I don't need your version anymore. I already know the truth." Evelyn swallowed hard. Her shoulders lifted like she might say something, but she didn't. She knew better. Or maybe she finally understood there wasn't anything she could say that would stitch this back together. "You crossed every line," I said, stepping toward them, slow and steady. "Not just the one in a marriage, not just the one between colleagues. You crossed the line of basic human decency, of trust, of respect. You made choices behind closed doors that tore apart everything we built in the open." My voice stayed even. No shouting. That was the part that got them, I think. The quiet. People expect anger to come loud and red-faced, full of broken furniture and slammed doors. But real anger, the kind that's carved from months of watching someone change into a stranger, that kind doesn't yell. It tells the truth, plain and clear. "You think I didn't notice the way you stopped touching me, Evelyn?" I said, eyes locked on hers now. "The way your eyes glazed over when I asked about your day? The way you started using words like I instead of we? I noticed, I just didn't want to believe it." I turned toward Mark. "And you, I trusted you because she did. Because you were just a guy at work. Because no one expects the knife in their back to come from the man shaking their hand. But you knew. You knew what you were doing every time you leaned in too close, every time you laughed too hard, every time you looked at her like she was something to win." He shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't stop. "You didn't just take my wife," I said. "You disrespected my home, my effort, my presence. You looked at everything I built and decided it didn't matter." Evelyn wiped at her eyes, maybe thinking tears would change the tone. They didn't. "You let it happen," I said to her. "Piece by piece. You let it happen and lied straight to my face while doing it, and now standing here, I see it all clear as day. I took a breath. Let the silence settle again. I'm not the same man I was a year ago. I gave you love, Evelyn, faith, my full attention, and you gave your time, your words, your, your smiles to him instead. She looked down, a tear finally slipping free. You made me feel like I was crazy, I said, like I was overthinking things, like I was being insecure. But deep down, you knew. You knew I saw it. You just hoped I'd look away. Mark tried to speak again. I didn't let him. And you? I pointed at him, voice still low but heavier now. You let her. You didn't stop. You encouraged it. You opened that door and watched her walk through it again and again. I stepped back, eyes still on them both. I've said my piece. I'm not here to make a scene. I'm not here to scream in the street or break windows. I'm here to look you in the eyes and tell you that I see you for who you really are. I see the rot under the charm, the selfishness behind the smiles. Neither of them said a word, and so I gave them one final truth. You don't have to lie anymore, I said. It's over. The story you two wrote, it's yours now, but I won't be in it, not even as a footnote. But that wasn't the ending I had in mind. I stepped past Evelyn, who barely shifted out of my way, and walked back toward the entryway. Mark still leaned against the brick, one arm cradling his ribs, the other hanging limp at his side like it had forgotten what to do. I passed him without a word and spotted his coat hanging on the hallway rack. A sleek gray number, some overpriced wool thing, probably picked out to impress someone at a wine tasting. I reached into the inside pocket and found what I was looking for on the first try. His car fob, the black leather tag, had a fancy logo stamped on it. One of those foreign brands with ads full of coastal highways and smug drivers. A new model, I figured, probably leased. He didn't strike me as the kind of man who paid for things outright. I walked back to the porch and stopped in front of him. He was watching me now, eyes wide, mouth half open, like a man trying to piece together what was happening a second too late. I held up the fob. "This was your ride?" I asked, voice low and steady. "Not anymore." Then I tossed it at his feet. It hit the concrete with a flat clatter and bounced once before coming to rest by his polished shoe. He stared at it, like maybe he'd imagined the whole thing, like maybe I'd return it with an apology and a chuckle. I didn't. His stunned look was worth more than anything I could have said, the kind of look a man wears when the walls finally fall in, and he realizes he's not half as clever as he thought. I turned to Evelyn. She hadn't cried. Not really. She dabbed at her lip once or twice, but otherwise she just stood there, stone-faced, shoulders drawn tight like a rope pulled too far. I walked closer, just enough so she could hear every word clearly, with no room for misunderstanding. "No tears from me," I said. "Not now. Not ever." She didn't flinch. "You're going to lose more than trust," I continued. "You're going to lose the image you worked so hard to protect, the careful version of yourself you curated for every dinner, every networking event, every meeting where you smiled and nodded like the loyal wife." Her expression shifted slightly, a blink, maybe a breath held. She knew what I meant. "I'll expose this," I said, voice quiet but sharp. "Your boss, your lies. The calendar entries, the messages, all of it." I could see it, her brain racing through the possibilities. Damage control, spin, maybe even denial. But the crack in her armor was there. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. "You think you've got this figured out?" I asked. "You don't. You never did. You assumed I'd be too blind or too loyal to notice. That I'd walk around confused while you played house in one place and fantasy in another." She opened her mouth, maybe to offer some broken apology or half-baked excuse. I cut her off. "Don't," I said. "You've said enough with your actions. Words don't mean anything coming from you now." She lowered her hand, lips pressed into a thin line. I stepped back and looked at the both of them. "Let this sink in," I said. "This night, this mess, it's only the beginning of what you've earned." Mark bent slowly to pick up his fob, careful like it might bite him. He didn't meet my eyes. Evelyn still hadn't moved from her spot. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but smaller in presence. The confidence, The control, gone. She looked like someone watching a mirror shatter and realizing the reflection wasn't coming back. I walked down the steps one last time. The night air was cooler now, or maybe that was just the heat bleeding out of me. My boots hit the driveway with steady rhythm. Not hurried, not limping, just done. Back at my truck, I opened the door and slid in. The engine started with a low growl, and for a moment, I just sat there. I glanced once in the rear view. They were still on the porch, two statues in a storm they'd created together. Let them stand in it. Let them stew. Justice doesn't always come with sirens or a judge's gavel. Sometimes it comes with quiet fury, delivered hand to hand, truth to truth, and I just delivered mine. I let the truck idle for a few moments, the low rumble humming through the steering wheel, porch lights still glowing behind me, their silhouettes frozen like two broken pieces of furniture in a room that no longer served a purpose. I didn't need to watch them anymore. I'd seen enough. I backed out slowly, tires crunching over the gravel, giving the neighborhood one final look, the kind of neighborhood where people wave but don't talk, where mailboxes match and fences never show where. Fake as a movie set. I rolled past the other houses with their trimmed hedges and dark windows, past that ornamental stone at the cul-de-sac's edge. Evelyn picked this place, not to live in, no, but she admired it, called it aspirational. And I suppose she found someone who lived up to that. Only it turns out perfection has termites. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the motel. Nothing fancy, just one of those roadside places with a neon vacancy sign that buzzes all night and flickers when a breeze hits just right. I'd paid for 2 nights up front in cash earlier that week. Not because I was planning to leave, but because something in me said I might need an exit. Call it instinct. Call it tired wisdom. Call it finally listening to the silence between Evelyn's words. My duffel bag was already packed. It sat in the corner of the motel room, zipped and ready, boots, shaving kit, extra flannel, documents, stuff that mattered, stuff I didn't want to leave behind. You don't pack a bag like that unless a part of you already knows the road you're about to walk. I tossed it on the bed and sat next to it, rubbing the bridge of my nose. My phone buzzed on the side table. Evelyn, then again, Mark. I let them ring. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and old air conditioning. The curtains were heavy, tan with that weird motel texture that never fully blocks out light. I stared at the vibrating phone and waited for it to stop. When it did, I picked it up, not to answer, but to open the banking app. Joint account. There it was. I stared at the numbers. Not a fortune, but more than enough. Years of careful saving. Canceled trips. Skipped weekends out. We were planning for something. Retirement, land, maybe a cabin. Something for later. Well, later had arrived early. I logged out and placed the phone face down. They could keep the house, the furniture, even the espresso machine Evelyn insisted on buying last Christmas, like it had changed how she greeted me in the morning, but not the accounts. Not the funds I'd earned waking up before sunrise, working weekends, skipping bonuses so we could have a better future. That part was mine, and I was claiming it. A knock came on the motel room door. I stood up slowly, unsure for a second, but it wasn't Evelyn or Mark, just the motel clerk with a receipt I'd asked for. "Everything all right, sir?" he asked, kind-eyed, maybe mid-50s. Looked like the kind of guy who could fix a water heater without a manual. "Getting there," I said. He nodded and left. I closed the door and leaned against it for a second. Took in the quiet. The phone buzzed again. I picked it up, this time just to look at the message. From Evelyn. "Please talk to me. This isn't how it was supposed to go." I stared at it, thumb hovering. Then I typed 2 words. "Don't call." Sent it, blocked her. Then I tapped Mark's name, deleted it, and blocked him too. No long message. No dramatic send-off. Just silence. The kind that settles deep. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder and walked back outside to the truck. The air was crisp now, cooler. Streetlight humming overhead. I opened the tailgate, set the bag inside gently, and looked up at the stars for a beat. "You'll both find out tomorrow," I muttered. "Accounts will be empty. Papers in the mail. All of it's yours. and none of it. I climbed into the cab, took one last breath of the still night, and started the engine. None of this ends well for either of you, and that's the one thing we still have in common. The divorce hit like a hammer to the side of the head, sudden, disorienting, and loud. But I was ready. I'd done the groundwork. The moment I walked away from that porch, I became a man on a mission, cold, focused, and done with hope. It started with the footage. I'd installed a few security cameras around the house about a year earlier, mostly because Evelyn wanted them. Package thefts in the neighborhood, she said. What she didn't know was that one of them caught the front walkway from a perfect angle, just wide enough to see the comings and goings when I wasn't home. I remembered a Tuesday night, 3 weeks before it all went down. Evelyn claimed she was stuck late in a strategy session, but that night a car pulled into our driveway around 8:17 p.m. Mark stepped out. I watched the footage a dozen times. They didn't go inside. They just stood there near the hedges, talking, laughing, and then, clear as day, a kiss, not a friendly peck, not a goodbye, the kind you lean into, the kind that steals time. That was Exhibit A. Then came the calendar. Shared, synced across both our phones for years. I pulled screenshots of vague client meetups, all listed with the same address I drove to that night. I went back 2 months. There were 5 entries tied to that location, all outside office hours, all private. Then the emails. I'd never snooped through her work laptop before, but after the fallout, she got careless and left it unlocked at the house while she packed a few things. I copied what I needed. There were messages with Mark using code names, emojis, and flirty little phrases that made my stomach turn. Lunch in the war room was one. Another said, "Tell your wife you're with the team. We'll brainstorm privately." That was enough for court, but the bruises, those almost flipped the script. When Evelyn realized how much evidence I had, she tried to play it dirty, claimed the confrontation at Mark's house had turned violent, said I hurt her, that I was unhinged. Her lawyer showed up with photos, light bruises on her arms, a small cut near her lip, tried to spin it as abuse, but the timeline didn't hold. And more importantly, I had a witness. The neighbor across the street had seen everything that night. Old school guy, Vietnam vet, always sitting on his porch with a mug of coffee and a pair of binoculars. Said he watched the whole thing. Said I didn't raise a hand until Evelyn charged at me. Said Mark looked more like the aggressor. He gave a written statement. That shut it down. The judge moved things fast. Too much evidence. No gray areas. I walked away clean. No support payments. No alimony. I even kept the truck and the tools, things she claimed she helped pick. Evelyn, she lost more than the divorce. I forwarded the footage to her company's HR department. No commentary, no angry letter, just the clip of her and Mark kissing outside the office during work hours, and a timestamp. Took 2 days for them to call her in. Corporate image mattered more than loyalty. She was gone by Friday. Mark too. The scandal spread like a dropped box of glass, fast, loud, and impossible to clean up. HR tried to downplay it, but enough people had seen the footage by then. Screenshots leaked. A private affair became public mess. Turns out Mark had a wife and 2 kids. I didn't know her personally, but I knew her profession. Lawyer. Sharp one, from what I'd heard. When she got wind of everything, she filed immediately. Custody, assets, the whole 9 yards. Mark didn't stand a chance. He tried apologizing in public, claimed he was misunderstood. Didn't matter. Evelyn moved out of our place before the ink dried. Last I heard, she rented a 1-bedroom apartment near the industrial side of town. Nothing fancy, not the neighborhood she once bragged about hosting wine nights in. She picked up freelance gigs, copywriting, branding audits. But word travels fast in her industry. Employers don't want a scandal risk, no matter how polished the resume looks. She tried dating again. A friend of a friend ran into her once, said she looked tired, like someone trying to hold herself together with duct tape and old perfume. Reputation clings like smoke. Me, I took the funds from our joint accounts before the freeze kicked in. Legally, cleanly, I left a spreadsheet. Even did the math. Fair split, then I left. Moved 2 states away, Picked up work with a buddy who runs a security firm. Small town, steady hours, honest business. People look you in the eye there. Started therapy too. Not because I needed to cry into a pillow, but to recalibrate, rewire the compass that had been spinning since Evelyn went off course. The sessions helped, gave shape to things I'd buried, helped me sharpen my focus again. A year later, she messaged me. Can we talk? Said she'd changed. I read it once. Then I left it there. No reply. I'd changed too, but I wasn't looking back. Drop your theories in the comments. How do you feel about the narrator blocking Evelyn at the end? Justified or cold? And if you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.